Hello. This week, in a special news bulletin, we reflect on a historic ruling from the UK Supreme Court finding the named person scheme to be illegal. The Supreme Court has vindicated our judicial review of the Scottish Government's controversial named person scheme, ruling that the plans are unlawful. In a historic decision, 5 judges unanimously struck down the central provisions of the scheme yesterday morning. The Scottish Government has no opportunity to appeal. After the judgment was handed down, the Institute's Deputy Director, Simon Calvert, addressed journalists outside the Supreme Court.
Well, we said that the named person powers to grab and share confidential data on parents and their children was a big brother nightmare. It was unwanted, it was unworkable, and it was undemocratic. And today, the judges have put a stop to that. They have said that the key data sharing provisions at the heart of the named person scheme are defective and they cannot go ahead. This is a terrific victory for ordinary families all across Scotland who never wanted state snoopers prying on them. Today, the Supreme Court has ruled in their favour. The Scottish Government now has to go back to the legislative drawing board, and if they want to legislate for a named person, they have to fundamentally rewrite it to properly protect the privacy of all families in Scotland.
Father of 4, James McIntosh, who was part of the legal proceedings, expressed his satisfaction at the outcome.
As a family, we are just delighted that this needless and intrusive scheme, named person scheme, has finally been declared illegal. Innocent parents have been really worried about having a state-appointed guardian monitoring their family, monitoring their children, monitoring even what the parents say and think. So there'll be a huge amount of relief all across Scotland today. The judgment tells the Scottish Government they have to respect families and their privacy, and we'll be keeping a close eye on them to make sure that they do.
The landmark judgment was written by senior Scottish judges Lord Reid and Lord Hodge, along with Deputy President of the Supreme Court, Lady Hale. The whole judgment was then agreed by 2 other Supreme Court judges. It is the first time the Supreme Court has prevented a major piece of legislation passed by the Scottish Parliament from coming into force. Under the proposals, from the 31st of August, every child in Scotland was to be assigned a state guardian, usually a health visitor or senior teacher. This state guardian would have been tasked with gathering a range of information about family life, including how much choice a child has in decorating their room and what they watch on TV. Guidance on implementing the scheme contained a series of diagrams including the Wellbeing Wheel, the My World Triangle and the Resilience Matrix. In total, teachers and health visitors were required to have a working knowledge of 221 risk indicators and 308 well-being indicators. The named person would then have had the power to share the sensitive data they had gathered. But the court stated that the data sharing provisions in the legislation breached the right to a private and family life under the European Convention on Human Rights. These central provisions have now been struck down, and the ruling has significant implications for all public bodies in the UK. In a warning to legislators for years to come, the Supreme Court justices noted, the first thing that a totalitarian regime tries to do is to get at the children, to distance them from the subversive, varied influences of their families and indoctrinate them in their rulers' view of the world. After the ruling was handed down, Deputy First Minister John Swinney presented the result as a victory for the Scottish Government and said existing legislation simply needs to be clarified. However, Christian Institute Director Colin Hart said the successful legal action was a vindication of years of campaigning to protect families from state interference. He dismissed Mr Swinney's claims and said new named person legislation would be impossible to operate in the way the Scottish Government wanted.
The named person scheme as it stood would have led to widespread sharing of sensitive information about parents and children. It was a big brother scheme with no safeguards. Yesterday, the Supreme Court struck down this central part of the legislation. The Big Brother scheme is dead. The Scottish Government has talked up yesterday's ruling as a victory for them, but that's simply not true. The court found that unlawful data sharing was at the heart of the named person scheme. The result is a vindication of years of campaigning by the Christian Institute and others to protect families from state interference.
All of us at the Institute would like to express our profound gratitude to our supporters who have stood with us throughout this long campaign. We give praise to our gracious God for acting powerfully to preserve the freedom of Christians to bring up their children in the faith. Until next time, goodbye.